Hello, and welcome back to me and another episode of Queering the Calendar. Episode 3, we're here to talk about the Japanese Grand Prix and also Kitchen by Banana Yoshimoto. As per usual, we'll talk about the race first, and then we'll talk about the book, and there'll be timestamps in the description in case you're only here for one of the two. Without further ado, because I am in a time crunch, let's go. To get the most exciting part for everybody, I'm sure, out of the way about the Japanese Grand Prix, I attended it. It was amazing. It was my first Grand Prix I've ever attended. I hope there will be many more. Finances allowing. It wasn't actually a trip specifically to go to the race, but once that was coincidentally happening at the same time, I kind of had to make it happen. So I had a general admission ticket and went Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Yeah, it was great. Hopefully soon, whenever I finish editing, there will be a video about my first Grand Prix experience in Suzuka. Watch the space. Shouldn't be too long. I hope. Now about the actual things happening on track. On Sunday, the race actually started with a 10-minute delay because of a accident in one of the support races, namely the Porsche Carrera Cup Japan. There was quite a serious crash that I actually saw because we were sitting right across from it, which is horrifying. Like, it was also really interesting to see all of the work that they did in the about 3 hours between the crash happening and the start of the race. That's just as a side note. The qualifying had a bit of controversy because the pole lap from Kimi Antonelli that was posted actually had some, I think it was some like convenient cutaways when there was some super clipping. I didn't actually take many notes on the qualifying, so I apologize for that. My race notes in general were quite scrambled because obviously I didn't take many notes during the race. I filmed a little bit and I just tried to enjoy it. Mercedes had a bad start again. I hope they keep doing it, honestly. I feel like the start is the main part where Ferrari can still sort of easily beat Mercedes at the moment. And yeah, I hope they keep at least that advantage. Piastri led after the start. There was a big crash from Oliver Behrman in lap 21 or 22. So there was a safety car from lap 22 to 27, which was within the pit window for kind of everybody. So all the people who hadn't pitted, which were Antonelli and Hamilton, and then quite a few others lower than top 6, they kind of won out, whereas Russell lost out, Piastri, Leclerc, not as good for them. Antonelli, as a result of that, got the race lead. It was kind of interesting to see that Russell asked if Antonelli was going to start where they practiced. I mean, good for Kimi for not saying. I don't know if they actually asked him to share, but yeah, would have obviously given a big advantage to Russell, and Russell is Kimi's biggest competition at the moment, so can't blame him for not saying that. I guess can't blame George for trying. I don't know. Maybe it's a selective driver radio thing, but I don't recall hearing other drivers ask that sort of thing when their teammate is doing the restart. But something that I think was more noticeable while at the track was that Bottas was the only car that unlapped himself, but he never actually caught up before the restart. I think they actually said it in the coverage when I watched some parts later, but it was noticeable because, I saw Bottas like come way after everybody else, and then like I saw the restart was happening. I was like, oh no, is he ever going to catch up? I don't think he did, actually. Or maybe I'm lying. I don't know. I'll have to check. Hamilton, Russell, and Leclerc battled for third. But I found it funny because the camera, I think, they kept following, I think it was Hamilton, Russell, Leclerc in that order. And they kept following Russell. And Leclerc was right after. And when you were watching it on the side of the track, it felt like they were all at basically the same gaps. And I think on the timing table was also like very little difference, but they kept not swooping after Leclerc as the last one, but like swooping after Russell, and you couldn't even tell Leclerc was there, which is kind of funny. A choice, certainly. Leclerc overtook Russell and then Hamilton, and then Russell overtook Hamilton. So I think Hamilton was in third after the restart, and he was no longer in third after that. We had a Verstappen-Gasly battle. One of many things I didn't think I would say this season, but here we are. Leclerc and Hamilton were overtaken at the same time by Russell and Norris, respectively, but both of them retook. Leclerc did a beautiful overtake on the outside of turn 1. That was amazing. I mean, I'm not the first person to say this. I think everybody said like, oh, that was a beautiful overtake, but it bears repeating. It was gorgeous. Norris managed to fully overtake Hamilton. I saw people talk about how with the new regs it's frustrating because it feels like the overtakes don't really stick. As someone who's rooting for a team whose drivers are also overtaken a lot, I guess it's nice to not immediately lose all hope when that happens. I guess remains to be seen how things develop. Apparently, Albon kept pitting, but I wouldn't know that because it wasn't mentioned once. I don't think it was mentioned on the broadcast, but I saw it in like funny wrap-ups of the race later, and I was like, what? And then I remembered that I don't think I even learned about the Verstappen-Gasly battle or the waving from Verstappen after Gasly actually overtook him or re-overtook him. Because all I heard in my ear at the track, I had like a radio, was the top 6. Like maybe a mention here or there of Verstappen, but that was really it. Not great. Not great. I didn't have a good visual of the timing table. At least it wasn't close enough that I could actually read properly. On TV, obviously, it's a bit easier. You get like the picture-in-picture thing and you get the timing table so you can at least have a bit of an idea what's going on. Stroll and Behrman were DNFs. Obviously, Behrman because of his crash, which was quite terrible. And I'm glad he seems to be okay, although I've seen some talk of like him looking kind of concussed when he came out of the car. Stroll was a DNF because the car's still terrible. But there were no DNSs. And Alonso finished a full race distance in the Aston Martin. That's nice. As a treat. I will say, also, the Aston Martin merch ate. They ate severely. They had like hats. They were like half Aston Martin colored and then half like white. And they had like cherry blossoms and stuff. They were really pretty. I was actually tempted to get one. I also saw a Red Bull one, but I don't know if that was this year's. But yeah, they were all sold out when I actually looked. Which is fine. I would have just spent a lot of money on something that it looks pretty, but I'm not an Aston Martin fan, so I don't think I would have worn it a lot, and that's a bit of a waste. So I do find it really funny that Antonelli keeps podiuming, or in this case, winning his second race in a row, congrats, at races where he's not allowed to drink. I don't actually know how the drinking age is in China, but I remember he had that problem in one of the US races as well. In Japan, the legal drinking age cutoff, I think, is 20, so soon, but not yet for him. I can't overstate how happy I am that this was not a double Mercedes podium, and I hope we will get more of these diverse looking podiums. Yeah, I think that was really funny. Good for Piastri for getting a podium in the first race he actually started. Hat off to that. Better late than never. Loved attending a race where the driver I'm rooting for actually ended up on the podium. Go him. I had hopes during quali that he would actually get pole. Those were squashed immediately by the regs. Yeah, that's really all there is to say about that. Obviously now we have a big break coming up, and I'm really hoping that we'll get big developments from Ferrari and everybody else, but mostly Ferrari, that mean we get a good car and not a Mercedes sweep for the rest of the season. I'm not strong enough for that, please. So yeah, I'm curious to see how things are gonna look. I'm filming this the day of the leak, that apparently GP, Giampiero Lambiase, the race engineer of Max Verstappen, has apparently signed with McLaren. It sounded like it's super imminent, or end of this season, but I think it's end of next season. But I'm merely a spreader of vague info and rumors. I'm not a verifier, so I have truly no clue. But I guess it lines up with the fact that Max seems to be looking elsewhere anyway for his racing fix. So I think it was to be expected. I don't think this is like a blindsiding thing for Max. I assume this is a conversation they've probably had, I would hope, since they seem like a really good team. And I would be surprised if they would just like spring those things on each other. I'm assuming that means that Max is going to retire end of next season. Now, away from those kinds of rumors and onto my book review for Kitchen by Banana Yoshimoto. I finished the book, which is already better than what I managed to do with the last one. Congrats to me. And as you can see, it's kind of short. A novella size is like 150 pages and has 2 short stories in it. One is about 105 pages called Kitchen, and one is about 45 pages, which is called Moonlight Shadow. This book was published in 1988, which is kind of surprising. Both short stories talk a lot, or like the main theme is grief. Both star a main character who has recently experienced like a grave loss of a family member, and in the second case their partner, and it's about how they cope with it, how things develop for them. It has a bit of a vague magical realism, only in the sense that there's like a lot of coincidences that are absolutely unrealistic, and it's like, oh yeah, it was just, an inkling, and you're like, I don't think so. For like contents/trigger warnings, there are obviously discussions of death. There's also transphobia and discussions of hate crimes. Quite descriptive. Please keep that in mind if you're sensitive to those topics. The first story is about a young woman who lost her last living relative which is her grandmother. And she is taken in by a similar aged young man. They're both in their early 20s, I would say, and his mum, who is a trans woman. The second story is about a young woman who lost her boyfriend in an accident. I don't really feel comfortable sort of advertising this book as like a queer story, because first of all, in the first story, it's about those three people, but the two young people, like, that's a heterosexual relation, and there's no hint that either of them might be queer, and the mum is trans. I guess if you don't want spoilers, don't listen to this next part, but to me these kinds of things are not really a spoiler, because again, this is kind of the only queer representation we get. It's that the trans character dies as a result of a transphobic hate crime. That kind of left a taste, which is not to say that obviously that doesn't happen and it's horrible. It still does. But obviously the only queer character in both stories is the only kind of present day character that dies. Then I feel like that needs to be mentioned. But yeah, they also talk about her pre-coming out and pre-transition self with like male pronouns. So yeah, if you want to read this, please keep that in mind, because I think that's important to know. I struggle to get into the writing style. Again, that might be a skill issue on my part. It's a little bit lyrical. It's a bit like vibes sometimes. This is a terrible description, but that's the best I can do. But it's not particularly complicated. I have to say, I enjoyed the second story more than the first, maybe because I was like more in the rhythm of reading it. There was also more of a mystery that I kind of wanted to find the resolution of, like figure out what was going to happen, because I've noticed I struggle more to kind of stick with stories and be interested in stories where there's nothing that you're kind of working towards, or where you're like, there's a mystery that you want to be solved or something like that. I thought both of them had a lot of relatable moments when talking about grief specifically, which I thought was great. And that's the main appeal of this book for me, is how it discusses grief and all of the little bits where if you've grieved a loved one before, you can kind of go, yeah, no, that's what that feels like. Obviously not all of them, like people grieve differently, but I found quite a few things where I was like, oh yeah, that feels an accurate representation of what that felt like for me, at least. I have to say, though I did kind of struggle to grasp the characters, I felt a bit distant from them, which again, that might also just be a case of this book is quite old. So I think characters were also just written a bit differently a couple of decades ago, so that might be why. There was a funny bit that I thought I'd share that was unexpected, because I think these days we think of Japan in terms of like outfits, at least I personally, either you think of kind of youth subcultures, or you think of people wearing office wear as like a really strict, very formal, very like suit, pencil skirt type of vibes. Those are the associations I make. And I found it really funny when in this book, which obviously takes place in the 80s, I read talking about a specific character here, that it was, and I quote, wearing what is practically the national costume, a two-piece warm-up suit. And that just cracked me up. I just found that really charming. As I said, overall, my favorite parts of both stories were the discussions of grief, and I would really recommend it for that. It was quite lovely. That was it. I hope you enjoyed. Do let me know what your big takeaways from the Japanese Grand Prix were. I assume everybody's is these regs need to be fixed before anyone else gets hurt. And also, hopefully, insert favorite team that is not Mercedes fixes their car by May. If you have any books that you recommend that discuss grief, I'd be curious to know, because I do find them quite nice, and I think it's often a taboo topic, so I'd like to hear if you have any specific ones that you thought addressed that really well, or where you could see yourself, if that's something you've experienced. And yeah, otherwise I will see you very soon. Bye bye.